What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. This is the first official episode where we have our first ever guest here on Early Morning Setup, a card show podcast. And I'm so excited to have our conversation today with Joe, as he has so much experience in the hobby as a vendor, with cards, with memorabilia, and he's definitely someone that likes to make deals, and he's definitely someone who's become a great friend of mine, a mentor in a lot of ways, being able to pick his brain, ask him a bunch of questions, just kind of feed off of his experience. And I'm very, very excited to be able to hopefully shed a lot of light and a lot of his knowledge to you guys here in today's episode. This is our first ever guest, so we're both very, very excited, and I cannot wait to show you this episode where we talk about, again, vending, card shows, experiences, how to do this, what to do when that happens. Really hoping to dive into a lot of the nitty gritty stuff for you guys to hopefully take away a lot of good information, not just from me, but from Joe, because this is going to be about him and his experiences, as I talked about myself a lot in the first episode, the pilot episode. But as we move further and further with more and more guests here on the show, I want you guys to be able to take away a lot about them. And again, if you guys ever want to be a guest or if you have any topics, let me know down in the comment section below. So without any further ado, here's my good friend Joe here on Early Morning Setup, a card show podcast. Enjoy. Oh, this is so exciting. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here. You're the first ever guest here on Early Morning Setup, a card show podcast. Joe, how are you doing this fine morning?
Well, I'm honored to be the first guest. I'm doing great. I don't usually get up very early, but for you, I will.
It is definitely much appreciated. And for those that may not know Joe, he runs an incredible business that is actually very well versed here in the hobby. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you do? And honestly, kind of maybe dive into a little bit how you do it.
Okay. I've been in the business about 20 years. Started off as a collector when I was a kid. Got out of it for a while. Jumped back into it full steam in 2010. Bought some cards, then just got addicted to the hobby again. Bought more cards, bought a warehouse full of cards, and then started a retail store. So did that for 3 years. Realized that in a full-time job is way too much work.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for small business owners in this state, or in any state for that matter. A lot of people don't realize how much work it is to run a small business. And you may be there for 8 hours a day, but you're really probably dealing with the business 2 hours before and 2 hours after you're open every day, whether it's bookkeeping, just mail days, responding to people. So a lot of respect for anybody that's a small business owner. And I know the business, I know how much work it is for you. And people just think it's just a great, fun, open the doors and the money just pours in. You really
playing with cards all day. Ooh.
Yeah. And it's listen, if you're making money doing something you love, it's great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're making money doing something you love, and that's great. But it's work, and I think it's got its set of challenges every day, things you don't expect. But I loved it. It's just I could only do it for 3 years. I had to sell the business. Got out of it for a few years, retired. Fortunately young, and now I'm able to jump back into it with some pictures, memorabilia, and then cards is my main thing.
So now I know your story a little bit, how you had the shop for 3 years, and obviously you were working full time. I think your wife wanted you to choose the shop or family, so obviously you chose family. We don't have to dive into that all too much unless you want to. I'll leave that up to you. But how did you find your way back into the hobby? So you find yourself now in the hobby here in 2024. At what point did you re-enter, especially at this degree, at this level? Because collecting a few little cards is one thing, but having some kind of business revolving around cards and the memorabilia aspect of it is a whole nother thing.
Right. It's funny. The 3 years that I owned the shop, I wasn't really prepared for what it would take.
The card shop itself?
The card shop itself, 2010, 11, 12, sold it in 13. I made a ton of mistakes. I think one of the first times I met you, I went to your shop to visit.
Mm-hmm.
I told you, I said, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So, reach out anytime and I can kind of walk you through the mistakes I made so you don't make them again. I think we all make those mistakes. Now, moving forward, I was fortunate enough to retire. I needed to do something. I was driving my wife crazy at home. Got all the projects done around the house, and then said, well, I can't sit here and play Wordle every morning and just, not do anything. So I bought a piece of property. I moved all my memorabilia and cards into the office space and formed
One that you're in
LLC.
now?
The one I'm in now, yep.
Okay.
And formed an LLC and just got back into it. I still had all my contacts, all my suppliers, my network of people.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have a retail store. It's appointment only.
Do you miss the retail store aspect of it? Because I think what you do now, I think from at least outside looking in, I think is really cool and really fascinating, especially the whole appointment only. You deal with serious people. You have a central location to store everything for you to get up and go to shows, which we'll obviously dive into in a little bit. But do you miss the retail aspect of it? Because you could dress the walls up very nicely if you were to have your own place. But it's also maybe a bigger commitment than what you're doing, but is that something that you kind of miss?
Honestly, I don't miss it. When you have a retail store, as you know better than anybody, you got to be there 40, 50 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be committed to it. You can't really have a store open for 10, 15, 20 hours a week. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So if I'm not committed to that and committed to putting in those hours, and I'm not right now, I don't want to leave a job that I was putting 40 to 50 hours, a week into for 25 years. I don't want to jump back into having to be somewhere every day for 8-10 hours a day. I miss the customers.
Yeah.
I do miss the customers, but I see the customers on a regular basis anyway. Those are lifetime friendships and relationships that we built over the years.
Absolutely.
But having to be there every day and grind like that, no, I don't miss that part of it.
So one of my questions that I plan on asking you later on is something about a piece of advice. And I want to say that for later, but you mentioned the mistakes that you made. And I think that's a very valuable thing. Just in business in general, it doesn't matter what business it is accepting and acknowledging the mistakes that you made. Is there one mistake to you that you made maybe when you had the shop, or maybe it's even a recent mistake now that you kind of corrected, that kind of sticks with you a little bit more than maybe some of the other mistakes? Because a lot of mistakes you can kind of move on, move past, and they're kind of done with. But sometimes there's one that might be a little bit more detrimental than others. Is there one that kind of stands out to you?
There's so many mistakes you make when you first start a business. When if you have a plan and you go to school and you take business classes, you have a foundation. I didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I jumped into it without a plan, really. So when I opened the doors, I really didn't have any kind of business plan in place. I said, I'm just going to buy. I didn't have a network of suppliers, which if you're a sports card shop and you only have one supplier, that's a tremendous mistake. You need 3, 4, 5, 6 different suppliers,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure that your inventory is covered on a weekly basis. That was a mistake, not really having a good foundation in the business world. But you can get past that with a little bit of work. One of the mistakes I made early on was as soon as I opened the doors, I started having people come in trying to sell me stuff for the business. Advertising is a big one that sticks out to me. I spent thousands of dollars on print advertising. Now, back in 2010, print advertising was a little more
still
popular.
a thing. Yeah,
that was a thing. So I was spending $200-300 a week on print advertising for like a year. Thousands of dollars.
Do you think it worked out? I mean, if it's a mistake, clearly it didn't. But in the moment, maybe, did you think it was working out?
No. At the time I did. At the time I was trying to generate as much people through the doors as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought one of the ways to do it was some of the local newspapers. That didn't work. So I said, well, after about 6 months into it, I said, let's put a coupon with the ad just to see how much
People
feedback, how many people are coming in. I think I had one guy in 4 weeks come in with a coupon.
Wow. So that was like a big red flag right there.
Right. And the coupon was for like buy a pack of cards, get a free pack of cards. He came in, he bought a pack of cards, he got a free pack of cards, and he walked out.
Boom, see you later.
Gone.
Did you ever see him again?
No, never came in again.
Oh,
So that was spending the money. You know, you get all these offers like improve your business, improve this, improve that, and as a new business owner, you're trying to generate business. You kind of fall for some of those traps,
mm-hmm.
and you shouldn't do that. The best advertisement I ever had for a brick and mortar was putting a sign at the street, an A-frame sign at the street. It was free. It didn't obstruct the sidewalk or anything, and thousands of cars a day saw it. So that was the best advertising. It took me a year to learn that. But
I'm trying to think for me a mistake because, I mean, going in, I had a business plan, I had a game plan, but I didn't have the experience or the in-depth knowledge of the business aspect. I was a sport management major for 2 years, then I went to psychology, and then I was like, I want to go back into sports. So it kind of came full circle. But I don't know if it's a mistake or maybe something I underestimated. And I knew I was going to wear all the hats: inventory, cleaning, sales, social media, obviously now in 2021 when I opened. But I underestimated the amount of hats that I needed to wear. I knew I was going to wear them all, but I didn't expect that there to be 1,000 hats, so to speak. And again, I don't know if that's a mistake or again something I just underestimated, but that's probably the biggest thing that sticks out to me because I didn't do the advertising like you did. I mean, I would do like a holiday ad on Facebook for like $15 every year, but otherwise, it's just I can't think of one giant mistake, and I know that there is one, but just off the top of my head, I can't think of one, and I guess that's a good thing. I would like to think, but mistakes in business happen all the time, and again, I think accepting and acknowledging are very, very important. But now that we know a little bit about you, Joe, I do kind of want to make a hard pivot and kind of ask you about how you got back into setting up at card shows. What made you want to take the business that you have and be like, I'm going to go set up at shows and give myself another avenue to sell stuff?
the actually avenue I was looking for was to buy stuff.
With the shows.
Yeah, the shows are a great venue. I always loved going to shows. When I had the store, I set up at a few shows. It's a lot of work, as you know, especially the multi-day shows. You got to start preparing a month in advance, pricing cards, getting everything ready. So it's a lot of work. And if you're the only person at the shop, then you have to run the shop and prepare for the shows at the same time. So, I was fortunate. I always had an employee because I had a full-time job. I had two full-time employees the whole time I was open, and they were both the best employees you could ever ask for. So I was very fortunate that they handled the day-to-day operations for me, and I could put on all the other hats if I had to. In terms of shows, when I got back into the business in, I guess it was 2020, I looked at the shows as an opportunity to really boost my inventory up. If I sold cards, fantastic. But just get out there again, meet people. I don't have a store. I always wanted to do an appointment-only thing just to make it simpler and less, what's the word?
Chaotic comes to mind.
Less chaotic.
I don't know if that's the word.
That's a great word. So I started small. I went to the Mohegan Sun show. I met Scott. I walked the show. We spent 2 days there at the show. I said, man, what a great venue for a card show. Like I think all dealers by nature are a little bit of gamblers anyway. And
the hobby's all about gambling.
Yeah, so you're inherently a risk taker and a gambler to begin with. Now you incorporate that with so many other activities and restaurants and things to do. It kind of resonated with me, and I met Scott. I said, I'd like to become one of your vendors, and he was growing at the time. He'd only done one or two shows. I got into his second Mohegan show, and the hobby I realized really quickly changed a lot since I was doing it earlier, 10 years prior. And we were just coming out of COVID, which was just insane.
Yeah.
That whole thing was just turned the hobby upside down. But I just found that there were so many more younger people in the hobby, probably because of COVID, I'm guessing. I just fell in love with it again, and I committed to every. I told Scott early on. I said I will be here for every show you ever do.
Plain and
I like the
simple.
way. Yep, I like the way you run the shows. I like the way you put things together. It's a super great guy, and from doing that show, as you know, when you're set up at a show, 40 other people. Well, not 40, but you get a good chunk of people that are starting their own shows, and they're passing out flyers. They want to get you to set up at their
Oh
show.
yeah, all the time.
So I did a few others. I really only right now I do Shriners, I do Scott's, I do Crown Jewel, and I do the Emerald Square show. Those are the only shows I do. I don't do any others.
And I think having the showrunner having a good showrunner is a big portion and a big part of making a show a good show, because I'm sure you set up at great shows, Scott's shows and not Scott's shows. And we mentioned Scott. He's definitely somebody I want to have on here, the podcast, because I think he has a lot of good stuff to say, especially from a whole different angle. I mean, we're coming from the vendor side, from the customer side. He's coming from the showrunner side. So I think there's a lot of light to be shed there. But I'm sure you've set up at shows where the showrunner is just bad, awful, very not helpful to the vendors. And it puts a sour taste in our mouth. I mean, regardless how much we make, it's just like, oh, I needed this, but they weren't, there to help me with that. So, what part of the show itself do you enjoy about it? Is it the customer interaction? Obviously, making money and the sales is a big portion of it. Buying stuff is probably a big portion of it. And ultimately, like, why do you enjoy setting up at shows?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, meeting customers and potential customers is the greatest thing you can do. If you're set up and you've committed yourself to a 1, 2, 3 day show, as a dealer, be friendly.
Yeah.
If somebody's wearing a Patriots jersey, throw a comment out about the Patriots. If somebody's wearing a Dallas jersey or whatever, start a relationship with someone. Believe it or not, it's not that difficult. But I go to shows and I see the dealers, some dealers just sitting behind the table, opening packs, not acknowledging customers, on their phones, dressed like they just got out of bed. I mean, hey, if that works for you, great. But my whole goal at a show is to have people want to start a relationship with me. So I try to give them as good a prices as I can. I try to be friendly. I try to be as knowledgeable as I can. And, reach out to me. Here's my card. Let's talk. This is my setup. Come on over, sit down, have a couple.
Make an appointment.
Make an appointment. And then the place is yours.
Yeah.
And like at the shows, it can get a little hectic because, you got 5-10 people standing at your table. You really can't connect with someone as much as you want to.
No, because you're all over the place. I mean, you got more tables, more space, and obviously you have, a team. But, sometimes you don't have that luxury to have a lot of space. So sometimes you are kind of, a little all over the place, and it is hard to build that connection. I
have an all-star team. An all-star team.
You don't need to rattle off the all-star team. I was gonna ask you something.
So yeah, I just threw that out there, and it totally got sidetracked.
Oh, it totally messed me up. I think the common courtesy aspect of it is one that's so often forgotten about, and people honestly make it seem like it's rocket science when it's really, really not. Like I tell people all the time, when they come here to the shop or even at shows is, the least I can do is say, hi, how are you? How's it going? And specifically here at the shop, if someone doesn't want to talk to me, I'll pick that up pretty quickly and just let me know if you need anything. I'm right over here, and I'll let them be. Some people want to talk and they want to communicate and they want to, get to know me at least. And I think that's just such a forgotten component of just common mannerisms, honestly, is just being generally inviting to people. I've said this on another video, said it a million times here at the shop, is I'm not in a mall where you're going to the food court or returning something at JCPenney and you just look up and you're like, oh, a card shop, let me just walk in. Now, people have to come out of their way to come see me with the idea of wanting to probably buy something. And the least I can do is say, hi, how are you? Because I'm sure you've been into shops. I've been into shops, and people probably listening have been, where you walk into a shop and they don't even acknowledge you.
Yeah.
You're just another fly on the wall in the shop. And I can't, in my core, ignore somebody walking in when they're a potential paying customer.
Right.
Or at least, at the very least, more a friend, honestly.
Right. What's the biggest challenge as a any store owner, whether it's cards or a coffee shop or whatever, the biggest challenge for a retail store owner is to get people to walk in your door. You're constantly trying to find ways to get people to walk into your doors. So as a card shop owner, you can be friendly, you can have a good inventory, you can have good prices, you can make it a place where they want to go and spend some time. And you can also, when you get those 30, 40 calls a day for people that are looking to sell their collections, I always encourage shop owners to buy or at least have the people come to your store with the stuff.
Absolutely.
Honest to God, I mean, you could have someone show up with a 2-row box of 1991 Flair baseball. Give them $10 for it. Give them $5 for it. Explain the values. Start a relationship. You take that $10 out of your pocket. You give it to the customer. You explain that, hey, I want to start a relationship with you. This doesn't really have any value, but I could throw these in and send them off to a wholesaler I have or something. It's $10 of goodwill that you've created with a person who's now going to maybe tell 10 to 15 people if it ever comes up, hey, I've got sports cards. Oh, go to that guy Murph. He's a really friendly guy. He gave me $10 for stuff that's probably worth $1. But that's almost like advertising.
Word of mouth, super powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So the $10 or the $20 or even the $100 you're spending on a collection, even if you break even, you're creating a relationship, and the relationship is where the business heads. Like that starts the business, that starts the money, that starts the revenue. So always encourage people to come in your store, and even if you don't want something,
a few bucks,
sometimes you just buy it.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of people, I probably have half a dozen people a week come in with, I have old cards, and I'm sure you got it all the time. Maybe it was different in 2010 where it wasn't, as old, but old is old, but they're 80s and 90s. And yes, it's old, of course. By definition, yeah, it's old. It's 30, 40 years old. But like, they know that sports cards have value, but it's not black and white. It's not black and white. So it's like certain things will have value, certain things won't. Chances are what you have doesn't have value. And I got to be the bearer of bad news and tell them, yeah, you have cards here and they're old for sure, but oversaturated, mass produced. The whole, spiel over and over again. They go in the quarter bins, whatever. And then you burst their bubble and now you're the bad guy. And just, I think simply educating people in a nice way is one that a lot of shop owners need to do, because I've seen shop owners not do that, where they're just like, yeah, I don't want it, and be done with it. You got to break it down, spoon feed them the information, why you may not want it. And then education, I think, is very important in this hobby, because there's always things that are happening and changing. And there's always going to be people that just simply don't know. And I think educating the people that don't know, I think, is very, very important. But no, I agree. People come on to the shop. For those that are listening that want to have a shop or have a shop, invite them down, get them into your space. Maybe they buy something. You never know. Maybe they have a diamond in the rough in that box of 91 Flair. You just never know. And, I always look at everything. And I'm sure you always looked at everything too. And you probably still do look at everything. You just never know what's in the box. Never know.
100%. And let's face it, people are a little suspicious about people they don't know, and they should be.
Yep.
They might have a bad experience 5 years ago. They went into a card shop and they had a bunch of Mickey Mantles, and the guy said, you don't really have anything here. I'll give you $100. And then they find out later they got ripped off. There's nothing worse than that for our hobby.
Yeah.
If you have a card shop out there, or you have a dealer at a show out there who puts the screws to someone, that's a bad mark for all of us. So I tell people straight up, if they have cards, I show them the comps. If you're a dealer and you have someone who really isn't knowledgeable, you need to show them. You need to educate them. I did it this week. I had a guy that had a bunch of 70s baseball.
You got to walk through it.
1970, 71 baseball. I spent an hour at his office looking at his stuff. And I pulled up some comps. I said, look, here's a Nolan Ryan, 1970. I think it's worth this much. Let's look and make sure. I showed him the completed sales, and I said, here's what I can pay off that number. Okay? And he really respected and appreciated the honesty and how open I was with him, and actually shared with me that he'd taken that stuff to a shop not that long ago, and the guy offered him $25 for the box. Honestly, It was probably worth, the box was probably worth $200.
Okay.
Wholesale.
Yeah.
It was probably worth $300, retail.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, these guys like that give a bad name to the hobby. So people have a lot of information at their fingertips that they didn't have when I had a store.
It's completely different. I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's definitely a drastic. Obviously, we've talked about positivity, we talked about negativity. I think 97% of the hobby is really, really good. It's just the 3% that speak the loudest. You
Agreed.
hear about those bad interactions, the scams, the thefts. You don't hear about as often. Oh, I got a good deal over here. I got a good deal there. I had a good time. Oh, the show sucked. Oh, the vendors were overpriced. Like that's all you hear about. And it's not the true story. That's just one page in the book of the hobby. But let me ask you this. What's something you wish you could change about card shows? Either the show itself, fellow vendors, or the attendees. How can we take maybe a negative that you see and try to, if you were to just snap your fingers, make it something good?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we need to reduce the volume of shows.
I agree.
To me, it's gotten to a point where, after COVID, the hobby just exploded, and a lot of people saw opportunities to make money running shows. And what bothers me is you only have so many dealers out there in Massford Island, Connecticut, say, in our market. And if you schedule multiple shows in a weekend, it makes it impossible for quality dealers to get to shows, and the quality customers have to select which show they're going to go to. I mean, they can't spend all weekend chasing shows. So, the biggest thing that stands out to me right now is we're diluting the market by having so many shows. There's only so much inventory to go around. There's only so much money from customers to spend. So what we're finding is, and I've started to see it with the last 2 shows I've done, the foot traffic has come down a little bit. The business is still up there.
Yeah.
But the foot traffic is down, and more dealers are visiting tables than customers. We know that. It's been going on for years. But dealers from the actual show you're setting up at are desperate to restock their inventory because they have shows for the next 5 weekends. And so there's just not enough stuff out there. So that's the one thing that comes to mind is I think there's too many shows. I think that promoters have to do a better job working with other promoters to not compete with each other, but to help each other.
And I couldn't agree more that the saturation of shows. I mean, it's almost like the 90s with cards. Like it's so saturated. And like, listen, I'm happy that there's tons of shows, and you could pick any weekend. You could probably find a show within a half hour of wherever you're living.
Right.
So just in a vacuum, it's a good thing because it shows life and it shows a strong pulse. However, when you look at the logistics of it, you're right. People have to pick and choose. Vendors have to pick and choose. And unfortunately, sometimes there's 3 to 4 shows on the same weekend. And I think that is just absolutely absurd. I've always wanted to start my own little 30 table VFW show, but I just know no matter what weekend I pick, there's going to be another show. And, there's a whole lot more that goes into it. So it's just like something that like just turns me off from it. But you're right. If these show promoters can talk to each other, be like, hey, I'm running this weekend. Don't touch this weekend. And I won't touch that weekend for you. Again, just common mannerisms, simple conversations, and communication go a very long way. But a lot of people tend to be selfish, and I think that's something that I'm sure you've noticed as well in a multitude of areas is the selfishness behind people. It's all about me, me, me. It's all about the money I can make, and that's great. However, when it's so diluted, how much money are you making and such like that? So I think the dilution of the shows is definitely something that needs to be addressed. But I mean, who knows how to fix that
Well,
problem?
to your point too, it's frustrating for me. I mean, again, we're in the greatest hobby in the world, right? But if I set up at say 3 shows a month,
Yep.
1 month, my inventory is not going to be drastically different at every show. I just can't. I can't cycle through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cards and put out new inventory for every new show I do. So what happens is you see the same faces coming up, and they're looking at cards that they saw in your showcase,
And they're like, oh,
2 weeks ago, and they're going to go,
yeah.
oh, you still have that, and that's frustrating for me because I want to supply the customer with the greatest inventory I can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot easier to do that if I have one show to go to in a month versus 3. I
Yep.
just can't. That's a big challenge, is to try and keep up with not only the comps, but having fresh new inventory. And the more shows you do, the tougher it is to do that.
Absolutely. It's everybody wants new. No matter if they see you today and tomorrow, they want something new. Whether it's today and next week, they want something new. And I think it's not a tough, hard ask because, I'm not trying to make it a pity thing, but like, you're right. You want to offer the best selection, the best prices, and the newest cards, of course. But setting up in multiple shows makes that a bit of a challenge because not only do you have to sell the stuff, then you got to take that and go buy new stuff. And sometimes doing that all in one day can be a little bit of a challenge. But let me ask you this. What's something that excites you about card shows? Is it the people, the customers, the sales, the money? What's that one thing that gets you excited? Like, oh, I got Mohegan this weekend. Yes. Oh, I got this show. Yes.
I mean, first and foremost, you want to make money, right?
Yeah.
It cost me several $1,000s to set up at Mohegan, between the tables, the team,
Mhm.
the rooms. We stay overnight. We make a weekend of it. So Michael Jordan's isn't cheap now that everybody's of drinking age. So my bill is doubled there every time we go. But anyway, I think just the experience of being at a good card show and experiencing the hobby, not only with dealers that you like, but with customers, right? And so it's a fun weekend. I mean, again, I've said it 3 or 4 times. This is the best hobby in the world.
Yeah.
And to go and spend a weekend at a show like Mohegan, where you have a great venue, you have a great promoter, you have a great group of dealers that you know, and then you have the same customers. A lot of the same customers, they put it on their calendar and they go to that show. And seeing those people again, it's great. I love it. And I love the other shows that I do because a lot of the same stuff happens. So the social aspect of it is great. It's great to make a little bit of money too. That's fun. It's great to buy. I love the buying aspect of the shows. So I look forward to all those things.
I'm glad you mentioned the social aspect. I think that's kind of one thing that gets oftentimes forgotten about. Yeah, I'm going to set up to sell. Yeah, I'm going to set up to buy. Yeah, it's going to be a long weekend, but you're going for those reasons, but also the social aspect. Like, I mean, I love setting up next to Mike and across from you guys. I think it's fun. I know we goof off a lot, but like, it just makes the day go by. It's just a fun environment, and it makes the whole experience more whole. I would say. Is card shows the best place to make deals, in your opinion? Is it the best place to find cards at the best price? I'm curious to hear what you have to think on that.
It's the best place to start deals,
Okay.
I think.
What about finish?
Yeah, I finish a lot of deals at card shows too, but some of the biggest deals I've ever done have started off with good, small to medium-sized deals at shows. You get a connection with the person, you give them a business card, you kind of exchange information, and you find out about them. What kind of collector are they? What are they looking for? I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure this has happened to you too, where you're sitting there talking to a person and they're saying, hey, do you have this? Oh, I didn't bring that, but I have it with me. And I don't have it with me. I have it at my office. You're welcome to stop by. And then the person, it's great that in like 2 weeks they call you and say, hey, can I stop by? And you end up doing a big deal in your office because of a show, something that started at the show.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to start a relationship at the show. It's very difficult to buy a huge card at a show.
As a vendor or
as a vendor, because you have to do your due diligence. If somebody walks up with a $500 card, that's one thing. If somebody walks up with a $5,000 card, there's chaos.
Another thing.
What?
That's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole other thing, exactly. Yeah. And as a dealer, you have to get into the card at a price that makes sense for you. And it's very difficult when you have 20 other things going on at a show. And there's been times where people have showed up with boxes that I've been like, there's $100,000 sitting in that box, and they want to sell it. And I'm just like, I can't do that deal.
70% is still 70 grand. So, I mean, how many people carry 70 grand with them to a show?
Exactly.
Probably not a lot.
So the answer is always, I'd love to start a relationship with you, and I'd love to be able to work with you. I just can't do it in this venue. It's too chaotic, and I need to spend an hour and a half looking at that box. So the only way we can do it is for you to come to me or me to come to you. We sit down and we go through it, methodically to make sense for both of us.
Do you think it's easier to buy or sell as a vendor? And second part, do you think it's easier to buy or sell walking the show? Because a lot of vendors will set up just to buy cards. Maybe not so much to sell, but they'll set up to buy. And then obviously people are walking around just looking to sell.
Right.
So how would you say, what's easier?
That's a tough question, Murph. I mean, I'm trying to think of a breakdown. What's that?
Only the toughest.
I'm trying to think of the breakdown of how many people come up to my table at a show to sell versus buy. And I want to say 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
It might be higher for people selling. It might be 60-40 people selling. So I think if you're priced right, it's easy to sell.
Agreed.
If you offer people enough money, it's easy to buy if you're fair with them. So, I overpay. Okay. That's something I do. If I see a card I like, I overpay for it.
Okay.
And sometimes that's worked and sometimes it hasn't. But what it always does is it's created a relationship with someone.
And that seems like that's like a big principle for you, is creating that Rolodex of people they may not know, a contact book of people that you're looking to build relationships and to build future deals, not just one, but future multiple deals where they're buying off you, you're buying off them, vice versa, and such like that.
Yeah, your network is your most important asset as a business owner next to your inventory, because when I pick up a big card at a show or a big card anywhere, I need to be able to call 3 or 4 people right away who I think might be interested in that card. And the only way I have that network of people is by creating that network of people. And so a good example is, like, I have high-end Tom Brady cards, and I have a bunch more out at PSA right now. They're all refractors. They all got good grades. They're coming back this week. I already have a list in place of people I'm going to call for those cards.
So you're already one step ahead of the curve even before the cards come back.
Because of the relationship and because I know what my customers are looking for. So I can buy into a collection and already have an idea what I'm going to do with it. Now, it always doesn't work that way. It's not always that easy, but it certainly helps to have the network. So the network for me is at the top of the list for any dealer.
I like that. And I think that's something that's very underestimated, especially when you go set up at shows where you may not have a strong network. For me, the Shriner show, that's not my clientele. That's me looking to network, market, obviously sell stuff, buy stuff too. But if I can walk away with 1, maybe 2 people who took my business card, and those 1 or 2 people actually reach out to me or actually make the trip to the shop, then it makes it all kind of worth it, in the long run. But I definitely want to ask you this, because this is the direction the hobby is really, taken, is the flipping aspect. So as a vendor, how do you handle and or deal with people looking to only flip cards? Joe, I want to buy that card. I need to be at 70% because I need to have room on it to go flip it. How do you handle that kind of situation? Because a lot of people will be straight up and tell you, like, oh, I need room on it. I'm going to flip it. Some people are like, I'll probably end up selling it. But the majority of people are just going to probably go to sell it. And of course, you'll get a handful of collectors here and there buying from you. But the people that are flipping, how do you handle them?
I mean, that's the hobby right now. I mean, 90, 80, 70% of the people coming up to your table at a show, even coming to my office and buying, are flipping. So I've accepted that. Okay. So I'm not going to sell you a Tom Brady rookie at 70%. We'll still be friends. That's a line I use with everybody. We don't have to do a deal, but we'll still be friends.
So nice.
If I can, it's funny because at the last Mohegan show, this dealer came up, and before he comes up to my table, he takes his vendor ID off and puts it in his pocket. And he walks up to my table, and he's acting like a walker, but he's got the laminate in it. And I said, you're getting better prices for me if I know you're another dealer. You know?
Puts it back on.
But yeah, and it's like there's no big mystery here. We're all kind of like doing the same thing. We're just trying to make a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And have fun. So you had asked earlier, can you have a better deal walking versus setting up? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just go to a show as a a non-dealer or non-vendor, and you walk around and maybe most people don't know you because you're far away from your usual places. Sometimes you can sell cards easier that way.
I agree. I mean, card shows serve a multitude of different purposes for different people. And I think one of the biggest things is for a lot of people is you have to at least go. You have to at least be there. You have to, whether you're first setting up or you're first walking around. And this actually segues into my next question. It's actually really, really, hopefully helpful to a lot of people. What's a piece of advice you would give someone just getting in? What's a piece of advice you'd give someone looking to set up as a vendor for the first time? It can be very daunting, very intimidating, nerve-wracking. What's something you would say to them to kind of ease their nerves, make them feel a little bit more confident going into that early morning setup?
Well, first and foremost, I wouldn't start with a big display. Start with one table, manageable, fill it with good stuff, price it accordingly, do your diligence, make sure your cards are priced. That's just a pet peeve of mine. I price all my cards at shows, and I'm open with people. Listen, we could take a look at the comps together and see if I'm where we need to be. I might not have gotten to that one for a month, but so know your cards, price your cards accordingly, start small, and understand that you're going to have to put on a smile and talk to people for the next 8 to 10 hours. Engage.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing that people always, I think, because I forgot it, certainly, you're going to lose money on cards in this hobby.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And if you say to yourself, I'm never going to lose money on a card, I'm not in this business to lose money, you're going to have a lot of stale inventory because you're going to lose money, and you have to accept the fact you're going to lose money at times on deals. That's part of the business. So, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as a new vendor, sometimes you look at it and you say, I have to stick to my 20% margin. I have to make 20% on every card. No, don't hold yourself into a corner like that. Don't box yourself into a corner. If you can take a card and buy it for 10 and sell it for 15, sometimes that's a good deal.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of vendors will stick to their guns because they bought it for $100, and now even though the market on it's $50-$60, I got to get 100 on, I got to get my money back. And I have a video coming out fairly soon how you're able to take that $100 card that's now worth 70 and able to recoup your value out of it through trading, which a lot of people don't like the idea of trading for one reason or another. I'm sure you've seen cards that come up to you where you'd rather trade into them because it's a little bit less of a risk. You're not giving out the money because you may not know if you can move it fast enough or move it for a good value. But if you can trade a few cards, then you're into it for less of a risk, and you don't mind doing that. And then neither do I. But some people, I don't want to trade, I just want the cash. Well, I don't know what to tell you.
They're in the wrong hobby if that's the case.
Exactly. And again, it's a hobby at the end of the day. We're all looking to have fun. Of course, we want to make deals. Of course, we want to win on deals. However, we are going to lose some. And I think that acceptance of not being able to win every deal is very key because a lot of people don't accept that. And I try to tell people all the time, as long as you're winning more than you're losing, you're going to be okay. There's no percentage or no, 7 out of 10 deals, whatever. Just as long as you're winning more than you're losing, you'll be okay. Because sometimes you just have to sell the card for $60, even though you bought it at 100, to take that 60 to put it into other stuff to hopefully win on those, to hopefully kind of, indirectly recoup that money. And again, a lot of people don't take that extra step to think of how they can, I can turn a loss into a win with a little bit of work and a little bit of patience. People don't connect those dots there, and hopefully they can kind of, open their eyes a little bit. And, through our conversation and that video that I have coming out, hopefully they can kind of realize. But someone who may be For someone who may be nervous about setting up as a vendor, what's a reason or two that they should just do it? Besides the money, which we all like. I mean, I know you kind of mentioned on the connections and the networking and the deals, but if I'm sitting here, oh, I don't know if I should set up at a show. I mean, I'm not. I don't know. What's that one reason to just go do it? Just set up.
I think like anything else, anytime you try something for the first time, there's always a level of nervousness.
Hmm.
And if you've put in your head that you want to get into the hobby and you want to become a vendor at a show, you have to take the jump.
Yeah.
You have to build up the courage to say, you know, I can do this. I can go. You're going to make mistakes the first few times you do it, like we all have. But what's the best thing that you can do as a young dealer? Start a relationship with a guy that's been around for a while.
Yeah. Pick
You
their
know,
brain.
pick their brain, be friendly, visit their shops, visit them, do business with them, start a relationship with someone who's been in the hobby a while. And most of those guys are very willing to help out younger people. Okay. Don't
Agreed.
fall for this trap. Don't fall for that trap. You got to be very careful at shows these days because there's a lot of bad cards, flying around. So, just at the last show I did, there was fake cards trying to be sold. So you got to really, really be careful of, who's coming up to your table, the deals you're doing. But as a new vendor, maybe the first thing you could do is just hook up with an older person who's got some experience, pick their brains, maybe even set up ask to buy space at their table, watch what they do. It probably makes more sense than anything is to, have like a training program where you're watching someone who's experienced,
A training program.
maybe helping them out.
Yeah.
Instead of setting up, just go, hey, can I help you out? You don't have to pay me. I'll just help you out. I'll watch the table for you. Watch how that person interacts. Watch how that person does deals. Then do that a couple of times, and then you'll be comfortable to make that jump.
Yeah. And I think being comfortable with uncomfortable is something that, early on for people in anything really is something that needs to be accepted just because like you said, your first time, you're going to be nervous. Of course, you're not going to know anything. You're not going to know any better. You need that experience. You need that knowledge, a mentor of sorts. And I think all those things are very, very important. And speaking of which, I asked you earlier, something about that you wish you knew. If you could go back in time and tell your novice self a piece of advice that you now know today that you didn't know then, what would it be and why?
Good question, Murph. Geez, it's like a 60 Minutes interview here.
I'm glad I'm the one that's asking the questions and listening. Usually on Hobby Talk, Ricky and I are going back and forth. So it's nice to be able to just kind of sit back and just feed off of your knowledge and your answers.
Don't be afraid. All right, I go back and don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to, take that risk on a really, really good card.
Can I ask you this? Were you afraid to make mistakes back then?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, because even more so when I started the store because I didn't really have a lot of knowledge other than visiting card shops. So, here I am. I got 1,000 square foot store. I got 10 showcases full of stuff. I'm hoping the prices are right, and customers start walking in, and your head starts spinning from the jump, and so you're afraid to make mistakes because you don't want to lose money. You have bills that have to be paid. So you're very conservative starting off where, I probably walked away from a lot of deals that, I didn't want to put more capital into the business. I wanted to kind of stay a little more conservative. I didn't want to buy a ton of wax. I wanted just the bare necessities. And, looking back, you can never have enough inventory.
Agreed.
You can never have enough inventory. So don't be afraid to take that jump if a collection comes in, as long as you're smart and you do your work and you buy it right. Don't be afraid to invest that capital into your business early on because it'll pay off in the long run.
I couldn't agree more. And don't worry, I'm out of questions. But as we wrap up this this interview, this episode, this show, is there anything that maybe we didn't address or that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you kind of want to highlight before we conclude this episode? It could be hobby related, card shows, card shops, vending. It could literally be anything that you kind of just want to add your 2 cents in before we wrap things up.
Hey man, we covered a ton of stuff today. We spent a lot of time talking about vendors and shows, and I would just say, as the hobby continues to grow, and I still think it's growing, even though it's coming down to earth a little bit. I still think that the shows are still fairly busy. There's still a lot of activity in the hobby. Because it's growing so much, when you're at a show, and especially as a dealer, as you know, but maybe some other people don't know, I have a law enforcement background. There's been a lot of stories recently about bad things happening at card shows. And I want people to know that 99% of the stuff that happens at card shows it's a great experience. Dealers walk away at the end of a weekend happy. Customers, hopefully, I think, are happy. But there is a segment of the population out there right now that's capitalizing on the money that's being thrown around out there, and they're making fake cards. They're making fake PSA holders and other holders,
stealing even.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on like that. So I actually had a meeting with my team not that long ago, and I said, we need to pay attention to our value boxes. I want guys hyper-focused on what's going on in our value boxes. I don't want a lot of cards coming out and people being able to walk around with cards coming to me. We have to have a system in place, especially after the Dallas show, what happened there.
Yeah.
I said, there's a lot more money in this hobby, and there's a lot more people trying to scam people. So after that team meeting, I actually came up with an idea myself where there's a lot of high-end cards that walk up to our tables at these bigger shows. I have to know that person, or I have to know people that know that person before I'm going to pull the trigger on a very big deal. And it's a little cautious, I know, but you've been victimized.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been victimized too, and it that's part of the learning process. But it's just a caution to all the dealers who are setting up at shows that sometimes you want to do the deal because it's such a good deal. You might want to rethink that.
Maybe it's too good to be true.
Exactly, and just be careful. Everybody should be careful. Even a seller, even a buyer, should be careful when they're buying. The good thing about as a buyer is you know who you're buying from. The dealer's there. You can find that dealer if you have to, if there's a problem. As a vendor, sometimes you don't know who you're buying from. So on bigger deals now, I'm kind of going to be a little more cautious, and I'm going to want to at least know that person, or I'm going to want someone who knows that person before I do. And I'm talking about, a few $1,000s.
Of course.
I'm not talking about a $200 deal. So just be careful, but have fun.
I mean, you're right. We did talk about a bunch of different things, and I think caution is one of them that maybe we didn't talk about. We talked about just set up as a show, make networking connections. Don't be afraid. However, there is a level of caution that does need to be had, especially it's hard to even say the bigger shows. You hear a lot about these thefts at the bigger shows, but even at the smaller shows, again, the value boxes are such prime real estate, for easy theft. I mean, there may be dollar cards or $5 cards or whatever's in the value boxes, but if they're able to steal it, that's free inventory. So it doesn't matter what the value is because it's just free money to them, really, at the end of the day. And I mean, I'm glad that we covered a bunch of different things here today because we talked about the good, we talked about the bad, the ugly, the great, and all that stuff. And I think this is all valuable information that people should know. I mean, because we're all in this hobby for multiple reasons, but I think having fun, being safe, making good deals, networking, obviously caution. I mean, again, there's so much that goes into this hobby and setting up at shows. And I greatly appreciate your time, your time here to just kind of go over everything hobby related, everything card show related. And I appreciate it very much.
No, I appreciate you having me, man. Keep up the great work. You're doing an awesome job.
Thank you. I really, really do appreciate it. Hopefully I can have you back on for another episode, maybe down the road, maybe when things kind of change a little bit here and there. But
anytime.
Thank you.
Hopefully you guys were able to learn so much about Joe, his journey, his experiences, his knowledge. Hopefully you guys were able to really pick his brain just from watching this podcast episode. Just in terms of everything hobby, everything card show related, because like I said at the top, he has a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. Again, I like to use him to pick his brain, and again, to use him as a mentor, just to give me information, insight, and knowledge. I mean, there's just so much there with Joe. So a big shout out to you. Thank you so much for being on this episode. Again, our first ever guest here on Early Morning Setup, a card show podcast. Super excited, super thankful. And at the end of the day, I really hope you guys were able to enjoy it, which I think you definitely were. But that will wrap it up for this episode. I really appreciate you guys joining. Hopefully you smash the thumbs up button, comment down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new or haven't considered subscribing. Check out the channel membership program, and I will see you guys in the next episode. I'm super excited to bring you guys more episodes of Early Morning Setup, a card show podcast. But until then, I've queued up an excellent video right there for you guys that I do believe is going to be excellent for your hobby endeavors. Hopefully, I'll see you in that one.